My name is Brittany Taylor, and I'm an ambassador here at Mountain View College. I'm here to introduce Debbie Nichols. Debbie Nichols has taught philosophy for Mountain View College since 1993. First as an adjunct instructor, then as a full-time faculty member since 2001. Her areas of interest in publishing includes ethics, worldview studies, and philosophy of religion. She also teaches a graduate curriculum in worldview studies that she has developed for Dallas Baptist University and has offered classes and lectures for various community organizations. She currently leads the core curriculum assessment team for Mountain View College and is the discipline coordinator for philosophy. Debbie is a happy grandmother of 6 so far and resides in Grand Prairie, Texas with her husband, who is a physical therapy professor for the University of North Texas Health Science Center. Please help me welcome Debbie Nichols.
Let's see. Destroy everything if I pull this out? It will. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. It's good to see everybody back. And a special thank you to Kathy Edwards for organizing this and getting together these nice refreshments. Thank you, Kathy. Also, a special shout out to Jake Wanger and Randy Clower for helping me when I got into trouble with video stuff. So you guys are way awesome. Thank you very much. So as I was visiting with some of you before we started here, I got 2 questions. One was, what happened to your voice? Yes, I had the miserable flu thing over the holidays. I don't think I'm contagious anymore. It's been too long. But I will appreciate your patience if I cough, or I've still got some of those vestiges of the eternal flu that never goes away. Anybody else have it? Yeah, a few people did. I brought my hot tea and my lozenges and all that. So the other question I got is, what is a last lecture? And people have been asking me that, in fact, all week. Last lectures are held all over the country at lots of universities and colleges, and it's really just a mechanism for helping us to imagine, what would you say if it was your last lecture ever? What's the important thing to say? And a number of people have said, wasn't there some famous last lecture? That was a fellow named Randy Pausch from Carnegie Mellon. In 2007, he gave a last lecture, but he and everyone in the audience knew that he was dying. And he died that following spring, if I remember correctly. But it was a profound talk under those circumstances, and so a book was made out of it, and he did a lot of press, and that may have been your first introduction to what a last lecture is. We had a last lecture series before that, and a number of people in this room spoke at it. I spoke at it too, so it's not deja vu if you kind of remembered that. I was surprised to be asked to speak again, of course, but then I thought, okay, somebody wants me to talk about something that is not assessment? I'm in. So here I am. But I will say that the fact that I got a second chance, and many people don't even get a first chance, it made it feel kind of weighty to me. Like I need to talk about something worthy of a do-over, worthy that I got more time to do this. And I'll be honest with you, I also thought a lot about the colleagues that we lost between the last time I spoke and now. And I thought I need to talk about something worthy of them. They're different from me. They might have chosen a different topic. But I not only would want to make them proud, but some of them didn't get the chance. And I got to. So I want to be worthy of that opportunity. So when Kathy asked me if I would do this and what I might want to talk about, I really had to think about it. And I must have thought for like 30 seconds. And that's just funny because the truth is I knew exactly what I thought was worthy of all those things. Not to mention being worthy of another precious hour of your busy life, right? Like many of you, there is generally something that is burning a hole in my heart at any given time, something that has become the obsession of my reading, my thinking, my personal growth. And so, yes, I had a ready-made topic that I think is the most important thing in the world right now. It has actually been a lifelong journey for me, but it has come in seasons. Do you have some of those? That come in seasons, like layers of an onion, and you keep peeling them away over the years to get deeper and deeper. And this is one of those things. So I suppose I'm on a journey that I am now inviting you to come along on if you are so inclined. I'd like to begin with some words from some people who are just better people than me, and they are, like Mother Teresa. Okay, she qualifies, right? I was really blessed to visit her first hospice/convent in Calcutta, India, the year before last. And already being impressed with her, this made me really fascinated with her as a woman, her philosophy, her thoughts that led her into the life that she lived, that most people admire her for. And she is credited with saying this, we're not actually sure she did, but it sounds like her, that people are unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. True? Love them anyway. That sounds like her, doesn't it? I wanted to start with that because I want you to tuck that away in your brain and remember that this is why we admire her. She loved the unlovely, right? And that's what was so great about Mother Teresa. Or there are words of Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu, of course, was appointed as the chair of the Mandela's Commission on Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa when apartheid was being dismantled and South Africa was attempting to avoid an even bigger armed conflict than it already had. And when Tutu was speaking about that lovely South African concept of Ubuntu, which would have made a good title for this, he said this: when we see others as the enemy, we risk becoming what we hate. Our maturity will be judged by how well we are able to agree to disagree and yet continue to love one another, to care for one another and cherish one another and seek the greater good of the other. Okay, you're starting to smell a theme. And nobody was more in our faces with it than, of course, was Jesus, who said, "You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you only greet your brothers, what more are you doing than others?" So he's setting the love of enemies up as the highest, noblest way to live. For those of you who prefer maybe a younger, prettier crowd, I brought Ashley Judd. Only time she's ever been quoted with Mother Teresa. I happened upon an interview with her last fall in the middle of the Harvey Weinstein hurricane, right? She was in the middle of that. And Diane Sawyer was interviewing her and asked her what would you say to Mr. Weinstein if he was right here, right now? Some of you saw that interview. And I was so stunned by her answer, I had to go scrambling to find the transcript. I wanted to get it exactly right, because she said this: I love you, and I understand that you are sick and suffering, and there is help for a guy like you too. And I don't think Diane Sawyer knew what to say to her. And I don't think she was letting him off the hook. I don't think she was being wimpy about it. She had already been very clear about what she thought should happen to Mr. Weinstein, but this was an unusual follow-up to that. But no one anywhere has gotten to my heart on the topic of loving those who are hard to love like Dr. King. Is that true? It does seem appropriate that I should have several quotations from him this weekend, being as we celebrate his birthday on Monday, but actually it's kind of the flip. I think we're celebrating his birthday Monday because he was simply wise about these things, and I would have quoted him anyway. But I grew up in New Orleans in the 1960s, and I'm clearly not black, I get that. However, I was part of the forced busing and those things that went on in most urban areas during that time. And there was a lot of fear. Black kids were afraid and the white kids were afraid, and we all were afraid together, actually. We had it more together, I think, than our parents did, to be truthful with you. But we saw the violence on the news at night, and we saw the violence in our schools, sometimes in the daytime. So I had at least a back row seat for understanding what Dr. King was talking about. And the first time I ever heard his Christmas sermon for peace, I think he turned my whole worldview upside down. I know you've all heard it, read it, whatever, but I've got a little chunk of it here that I'd like us to listen to so that we're all on the same page when I refer to it. So, hold on, I think I have to do this by hand.
I've seen too much hate to want to hate myself. I've seen hate on the faces of too many sheriffs, too many white citizens councilors, and too many Klansmen of the South to want to hate myself. And every time I see it, I say to myself, hate is too great a burden to bear. Yes. Somehow, we must be able to stand up before our most bitter opponents and say, we shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we will still love you. We cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws and abide by the unjust system, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good, and so throw us in jail. We will still love you. Burn our homes and threaten our children, and as difficult as it is, we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities at the midnight hour and drag us out on some wayside road and leave us half dead as you beat us, and we will still love you. Send your propaganda agents around the country. Make it appear that we are not fit culturally and otherwise for integration, but we'll still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And one day we will win our freedom. We will not only win freedom for ourselves, we will so appeal to your heart and conscience that we will win you in the process. And our victory will be a double victory. If that is to be peace on earth and goodwill to...
Does that give you chills? It did me, still does. That idea of a double victory, I think, changed me. Not just on ethnic issues, all kinds of issues. The idea that our primary goal should be to obliterate our enemy, but to win him. And it got to my heart. I understood Dr. King so much sooner than I understood Jesus or Gandhi or Ashley Judd or anyone. He changed me. Now, having said that, I realize that there may be people in the room who do not think he was on the right path, or that loving one's enemy is a noble or good way to live. I promise I'm going to deal with that in a few minutes if y'all would hang out with us. There are people in this room who would say that your worldview includes the idea of loving your enemies, that it's there. A lot of you would probably be somewhere in between, I would guess. I know most of the people in this room, and y'all are at least polite to your enemies. You don't wish anyone ill. You are grown-ups and you play nicely in the sandbox, even when you have to play with people who are at odds with you. So I really would like, if I'm successful here today, to address everyone in the room as we consider the idea of loving people who are difficult to love. And I'd like to start by making sure that you have a mental list in your head right now of people who might, in fact, qualify as your enemies. I don't use that word. Do you? Do you ever use the word enemy, like even inside your own head? Because I don't, and it can be a little tricky, and we could even be tricked into thinking we don't have any because we don't use that word. But the truth is, maybe, or not. Or not. I ran through this whole thing before we started and it worked. Now it's going to go 18 slides ahead, isn't it? And now it won't even stop. Oh, we have the circle. Could we stop and sing Kumbaya, possibly? Oh, let's see. What should we do? Restart the program? No. Just wait. Okay. Well, can I talk even without this?
Yes.
Okay. Y'all let me know when it's finished thinking. Human beings are really, aren't we self-centered? Which means we end up with folks who are in opposition to us over something. And I would say we're also very, oh great, very tribal. Y'all know what I mean by tribal? We're self-centered together in groups. In fact, since we can't get to my stuff, let me just tell you this. Where is Dean Ghetto West? Oh, here you are. Front row. I was reading an article on his Facebook page the other day, which, you know, Facebook is where I get all my really important news.
Not fake at all.
But this was a New York Times article by David Brooks, whom I sometimes find provocative. And he was talking about how Americans have become tribal in one particular way. Okay, we got to go back a ways. And that is, we become tribal around our suffering, around our victimization groups. And he made this case for the idea that, yeah, that's the slide we want. This idea that, like, we're so individualistic and we become so lonely in our solipsistic little universes that we have begun to grasp at the low-hanging fruit of pain and grouped ourselves together by our suffering. And I think I'd have to add some stuff to that out of postmodern philosophy, but I thought it was a very interesting conversation piece, which I assume is why you posted it. Okay, yeah, I just thought it was very interesting. But is it not true, and thank you to the people who just rescued me there, that we end up with a lot of us's and thems, true? And them is not us because them doesn't agree with us. And them is at cross purposes with us, and that's how they become them. And I wanted to brainstorm a little list here just to make sure you get some thems in your head. Them can be really big, like nation states or ethnic groups, right? I'm not real fond of Kim Jong-un right now, for example, or ISIS, perhaps. Them can be, oh my. I don't even care what us you are, you've got some thems politically right now, don't you? For sure. But them can be a lot closer to home, too. Them can be right here at the college. Now, I believe we all love students, true? Do we always agree about how to manifest that? What the priorities should be, blah, blah? I think we don't. So we end up in our little work groups or factions or cliques all arguing with one another, or perhaps sometimes just talking behind each other's backs, because we've alienated ourselves into groups around whatever the topic is, and that's because we're family, right? It is. That's part of family. In fact, in your family, there might even be some tribes, huh? You just survive the holidays, and if your family doesn't have any, like that side of the family, then cool beans for you. I'm not sure Debbie's family has that. I love to watch your family on Facebook. But, some of you had to share a holiday table with, like, Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation. Did you not? Families can have tribes of them. Here's a tribe of them that we've all experienced. There's not very many of them, but we do have students who make our work difficult, don't we? It, honest to goodness, only takes one student with some poor social skills to threaten to ruin it for a whole class. We really have to work at providing a good educational experience when that happens. And I'm guessing those are exactly the same people who end up over in the Student Services building doing what they do over there. So it's not just in classrooms. And if we were in a different business, it would be some other kind of clients, right? Our clients happen to be students. There's a them tribe that I've been working very hard on lately inside my own soul, because I really embrace marginalized people. And I know y'all, and you do too. I have now recognized that I have made an alienated tribe out of the ones who do the marginalizing. Right? I might use the word enemy there if I were inclined to use the word enemy. And then, of course, there are bad drivers. And there are. So they're on your list even if nobody else is. So I'm hoping at this point, I don't usually try to make people think about their enemies, but I'm hoping at this point you have a reasonable little list of, oh yeah, they are hard to love, those people, right? So here's the deal. If I do have people that I'm alienated from and who are hard for me to love, but I do embrace the idea that I should love my enemies, and why am I not Mother Teresa? I'm old enough. I should have accomplished this by now. And there are a few of you here that I'm looking at who are really close. But most of us aren't Mother Teresa, right? So why not? And the answer is embarrassingly simple. Well, there's several answers, and they're all embarrassingly simple. One is that just because it's part of my worldview doesn't make me good at it. True? There are probably other things I say I believe that I'm not very practiced at, and I'm not very good at. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that for much of my young adult life, I just sort of assumed that because this was part of my worldview, I therefore love my enemies. But loving one's enemies actually requires cultivation, doesn't it? Because it isn't instinctive, it's not natural, it's very counterintuitive. We have to actually work at it. And I think it took me a long time of growing up, layer by layer, peeling this back, to figure out that I was making a fundamental mistake, and I think it's a mistake that a lot of Americans make, and that is that I was substituting I don't hate my enemies for I love my enemies. Would you agree a lot of Americans do that? I think we do cultivate what's the word? Unhatred. Not hating our enemies. Tolerating our enemies. That will work. But it's not the same, is it? Elie Wiesel is famous for having said that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. If he's right, then in the words of Scooby-Doo, ruh-roh, I'm busted. There's an awful lot of people in the world that I'm just indifferent about. I don't want any bad to come to them, and I'll be polite to them. I don't hate them. But I really just want them to go away. Okay, am I speaking truth or is this just me? All right. Even if he's wrong and indifference is not the opposite of love, you understand there's a huge amount of difference between the poles of hate and love. And just to not hate does not mean we love. So if I were to get serious about this and actually want to love my enemies, what would that look like? And I've been camping on that kind of reading for quite a while now. That's probably a whole other conversation. But I did pluck a couple of quotations here that might help, because here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it can't just be that I approve of everybody. That wouldn't be logically possible, would it? So that can't be what it means to love them. And loving them can't be liking them. Because wouldn't that be sort of existentially impossible to like everybody? I think it would. So what on earth does it mean? Thomas Christensen, who is a journalist, I like what he had to say, that loving your enemy does not mean you have to add them to your Christmas list or make them your best friend. It doesn't mean that you excuse their actions, and I find that very important. It means you forgive them. Let us go forth to conquer injustice in our time by the courage not to demand retribution. That's an important point to me. But rather to repay injury with blessing and hate with love. That retribution thing is hard, isn't it? Yesterday someone almost killed me on the highway, and I jammed my finger in the stomping on the brakes and the skidding of my car. My middle finger. And my husband said, if you just use that thing properly, it wouldn't be jammed now. But sometimes, boy, you want that last word, don't you? I find that it's pride, more or less, that stands in my way of actually loving my enemy, at least most of the time. All right, one more from Dr. King. Oh, put Jesus first, sorry. And I'm sorry I don't have any video of Jesus. I only have video of Dr. King. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. A lot of people recognize the golden rule, but most people do not recognize that Jesus said it in the middle of a conversation about enemies. He didn't mean it just for your, buddies. There are centuries of scholarship on passages like these, trying to figure out what on earth would a first century Jew have heard. They're under the thumb of the Roman Empire. Would it have meant something different to them than it meant to us? But whatever it ends up meaning, we do get the general idea. There's no retribution here. There's blessing instead of cursing. All right, that helps to set up Dr. King a little better. I hope this doesn't bust our thing here again.
Then the Greek language comes out with another word for love. It is the word agape. Agape is more than romantic love. It is more than friendship. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. Agape is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. And so when you rise to love on this level, you love all men, not because you like them, not because their ways appeal to you, but you love every man because God loves him. And this is what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. And I'm happy that he didn't say like your enemies, because there are some people that I find it pretty difficult to like. Like is an affectionate emotion, and I can't like anybody bombing my home. I can't like anybody who would exploit me. I can't like anybody who would trample over me with injustices. I can't like them. I can't like anybody who threatens to kill me day in and day out. But Jesus reminds us that love is greater than like. Love is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men.
So it's not philein, it's not eros, it's not storge, it's agape, for those of you Greek folks. That's helpful to me. All of those things have helped me to come up with a little definition that's like the Gospel of Debbie, you know. It's just my own internal plumb line, and I'm sure it's woefully inadequate. But here's how I think of it. That it has to do with working for genuine goodness for one's enemy and declining retribution, even at personal cost to oneself. I underlined working because I think it's more than wishing. It means me doing something if there's something I can do. And it means genuine goodness. It doesn't mean calling up Kim Jong-un and saying, well, dude, how's that Destroying America project coming along? How can I help? It's not giving them what they want. It's doing what is for real good for them. And that usually includes divesting people of evil, not cooperating with it. I'm sure this is inadequate, but I haven't even mastered it yet, so I haven't worried about refining it any further. And I also think philosophers like too much to make definitions for things. But the truth is, for a whole lot of things in this world, we don't need a definition. We just know it when we see it. Is that true? So I'm thinking that maybe loving our enemies looks like Nelson Mandela's Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. That was very costly. It was costly in particular, I think, to the black community. But it avoided something much more costly. And so far so good, well, you know, relatively speaking. Maybe it looks like the Amish community at Nichols Mines, Pennsylvania. Do you all remember this? Where their milk delivery guy, Charles Roberts, came into their community, knew a lot of people in the community, and he walked into their schoolhouse and pulled out a gun, took everyone hostage, let the little boys go, kept the girls, killed a bunch. He killed 5 of them and shot several others and then killed himself. And that very same afternoon, the elders of that Amish community went to the widow and said, "What can we do for you?" They offered her forgiveness for her husband, because they couldn't offer it to him, and forgiveness for anything she might have suspected. and befriended her. And it turns out that one of those elders who was there that day, his daughter had been murdered. She had been the eldest girl inside that schoolhouse. She was 14. And she tried to get the man to let the little girls go and just keep her. And when he became angry at that and turned the gun on her, she said, "I forgive you." And he shot her. Bigger and better than I am. Maybe loving our enemies looks like a Dutch woman, Corrie Ten Boom. Ever heard of her? She wrote books and there was a film made about her life. She and her sister and father had hid Jews in their home during World War II. They got caught. They were sent to Ravensbrück. The father and the sister both died, but she survived and lived to be an elderly woman. I happen to be good friends with her, the woman who was her personal companion during her later years of life. And boy, the stories about her are so interesting. But she has written about this one, that years after Ravensbrück, she was giving a talk about her experiences. And I guess a man in the audience she recognized. He had been one of the guards and one who was particularly cruel to her. And it just caught her heart and her breath. And after the thing was over, he came up to her and asked her forgiveness and offered his hand. And to hear her explain it brings tears to me every time, this watershed moment in her life where she knew she had to make a choice. This was it. This was her opportunity to choose how to tell the story inside of her own heart of what had happened to her. And she forgave him and took his hand. I hope you and I never have to forgive an enemy like these. Most of ours are much smaller. But I think we can take some clues from these. Maybe ours are just like telling the hard truth to a student who needs to hear it. I find that much harder than just being patient with them. And I don't know, when you take the risk and you take the time and you work with them through something because you've chosen to tell them the hard things that they need to hear. There's a lot of energy that goes into that. Maybe it's just holding your gossip about you-know-who. Okay, and whoever you just thought I meant, that's you-know-who. Whoever your you-know-whos are. I have them, you do too, don't you? And I'm particularly bad about that one. Not everybody agrees. And some of you don't agree. I don't know you well enough to know who, but some of you don't agree. I'm trying to be fair, and I brought a very articulate spokesperson for the other side, people who think that it's foolish to love your enemies. I brought the late Christopher Hitchens, and I'll let you take a listen to him. It's not too long.
Springfield, Illinois, you're on with Christopher Hitchens.
Good morning, Peter and Christopher.
Morning.
You were recently on a book panel where your co-panelist, Jonathan Kirsch, I believe, was rebutting a point you had made. And as he was talking, you interjected, "It's immoral to love your enemy." You were not given a chance to elaborate on that, so I'm going to give you that chance now. Thank you.
I think I can remember the event you were talking about. I think it was in Los Angeles, wasn't it, at the book fair? Yes, I don't like being told, especially at a time like this, that it's my duty to love my enemies. People who want to go and love Bin Laden can go do it on their own time. They're not to tell me that I'm to do the same, or they're certainly not to tell me that that's moral preaching. No, we have to hate our enemies and try and destroy them before they destroy us. That's a responsibility. To be neutral on such a point, especially if you're a father or if you consider yourself a citizen with duties to his fellow citizens, is wicked. It should be described as such. Christianity is masochistic pabulum in that way. It actually disarms those of virtue and leaves them at the mercy of those who are wicked.
Okay, so I heard him say that it's impractical, and that as citizens and parents and those who care for our neighbors, we have to get rid of evil, right? Is that what he said? And he thought that loving our enemies would disarm us from so doing. Is that what you heard? Perhaps so. That's my next point. Thank you. See the kids on the front row. One step ahead. Obviously, I think he's wrong, or I wouldn't be here. But I think there are 3 reasons that he's wrong. Let me launch them at you for your consideration. But please know that I respect you if you think that I'm wrong about this. This is a very complex issue, and I understand why people think this is a bunch of flower child, impractical, whatever, right? So, and I'm perfectly happy to engage in future conversation with you about this. I think he's wrong because he's misunderstood. If you love your child, isn't part of loving your child to divest that child of whatever evil pops up in that child? That is part of working for the genuine good of somebody you love. I do not know anyone who preaches loving your enemies, or even anyone who is a full-blown pacifist, which would be like the next step. I don't know anyone who thinks we should do nothing about evil. Also, because all of the people that I've quoted to you and all of the worldviews that would tell you to love your enemy also tell you to love your neighbor. And if you're going to love your neighbor, you're going to have to try to squelch the evil that might be coming against her. True? So it's worth noting to me that all the people who tell you to love your enemies are only talking to you. I'm supposed to turn my other cheek, not yours. Right? This is at cost to me, not cost to you. So I think that's a different thing than thinking that you just want to let evil go because, after all, we love our enemies. Right? So I think he's misunderstood. Secondly, I understand why he says it's masochistic and impractical. And it is true that if I turn my other cheek, I am very likely to get hit. Right? I get that. I understand what he's saying. But it's the only hope of positive change. The hating your enemy will never change anything. The outcome is quite predictable. In the obvious words of Gandhi, he says we can only win over the opponent by love, never by hate. That is stating the obvious. Because 9 times out of 10, loving your enemy probably isn't going to work, but there might be a 10th time. Maybe. In an entirely different speech, Dr. King said this. Now, there's a final reason I think that Jesus says love your enemies. It is this. Love has within it a redemptive power. And there's a power there that eventually transforms individuals. There's something about love that builds up and is creative. And there's something about hate that tears down and is destructive. So love your enemies. Dr. King's worldview was a theistic one. He would have believed that love is it's a thing, it's a force, it's a substance in the spiritual realm. It's what Plato might have called a form. It does work in the world. Now, I agree with him because my worldview is the same as his, but you don't have to share that to get the idea that the only practical hope of positive change is for one of us to stop hitting. You can hit me and I can hit you twice and you can hit me 3 times and I'm pretty sure I know how this ends. In a bloody mess on the floor, right? Maybe one of us gets the upper hand on the other, and maybe that's even temporarily necessary if you're going to save someone else from some imminent danger. But it's not going to change anything for the better. Not long term. The only hope is love. Okay, so far, I'm going to take a moment. I wasn't sure we'd have time for this. I think it's also the only hope of change in ourselves, if I could pull up the Dalai Lama for a moment. Merely thinking about compassion and reason and patience will not be enough to develop them. We must wait for difficulties to arise and then attempt to practice them. And who creates such opportunities? Not our friends, of course, but our enemies. There are certain kinds of compassion and reason and patience that are wrapped up in love that cannot be exercised anywhere but on an enemy. They're undoable anywhere. So if we're going to say that it's wrong to love your enemies, we're also going to say that certain things that we've always held virtuous and taught to our children are not virtuous. Certain things about our own growth that we always thought were virtuous are in fact not. All right, so I think he's misunderstood. I think it's the only hope of change, even though it often doesn't work in the practical way that I'd like it to. But most importantly, here's the big one. I think it's because love, especially the love of enemies, is beautiful. And you know it's beautiful. Now there is this connection between beauty, truth, and goodness that post-Enlightenment Westerners no longer talk about or think about. That'll be my third last lecture. We're going to resurrect some Plato and Aristotle and talk about beauty, truth, and goodness and the connections. But let me demonstrate my point with a few good toys. Parents and grandparents, do we know this? We've all seen the Toy Story trilogy, and yes, it's a trilogy. And I had to watch the whole thing over again over the holidays, so it was on my mind. I want to show you a clip. And in this one, this is the third film. Andy has grown up and gone off to college. The toys are sad. They end up being given to a daycare center, which is, okay, at least we'll get played with, right? But it turns out that when the kids go home at the end of the day and the lights go out, the playroom is run by a horrible big purple bear who's kind of a mob boss named Lotso. And he's got like his other toys who are sort of his henchmen, you know? And our toys have to find a way to escape this terrible situation, and they do, but then Lotso finds them. And long story short, they all end up in a dumpster, including Lotso, and then a trash truck comes to get them and then takes them to a waste management plant. And in our clip here, the toys are on some kind of like a conveyor belt, and they are going toward a big grinder thing that's going to turn them all into little plastic bits, because this is a children's movie. Okay, but that's what's happening. So watch how that plays out. Okay, stop. Let's try again. Oh no.
Back all the way back.
All right, well, let me just say what happens. It's cute as it can be. Okay, what happens is they're all on this conveyor belt. They're all going toward this big grinder thing, okay? And suddenly they realize that there's a magnet above them that's pulling all of the metal out of the trash to save it. So each toy grabs a piece of metal and gets stuck up on the metal conveyor, right? So this is how they're going to survive. The only problem is once they're all safe, they're all hanging up there on the metal conveyor, out of the trash comes a purple hand. Lotso. And he's stuck. So Woody drops down and goes after him. Doesn't look like it's going to be successful, Buzz, he's the little spaceman, he drops down and goes to help Woody. And of course they barely get Lotso out just in time. And they all grab a golf club and get stuck up on the metal and miss the grinder. Okay? That's my clip. How about that? Okay, and then the next scene, no. Well, I am glad Hollywood is teaching my kids that enemies deserve another chance. Now, spoiler alert, in the next scene, Lotso betrays them again. That's true too. And I'm glad somebody's telling my kids that it doesn't always end like a fairy tale. Because Lotso does betray them and they're in trouble again. Okay, I think that'll work from here. I'm sorry about that clip, it was my best one. But isn't it the same sense when Jean Valjean could kill Inspector Javert and he doesn't? Isn't it the same sense when Apollo Creed helps Rocky? Are you old enough for that? Okay. How about when Heidi's persistent, naive love saves her curmudgeonly grandfather? Did every girl in the room read that book? No?
Yes.
How about when Katniss spares Peeta? Remember, she won't kill anybody who's not actually trying to kill her. And then at the end, she won't kill Peeta, and she totally defies the rules of all the Hunger Games, right? And this is how she becomes the heroine. True?
Yes.
How about when Paul Rusesabagina, himself a Hutu, saves all the Tutsis in his hotel at risk to his own life and his family? Catch Hotel Rwanda if you missed that one. And then Harry Potter saves Draco, right? Did I do a good job of covering the gamut of tastes and, right? A little bit for everybody. We know this is beautiful. We have poetry and novels and films by the thousands to tell us that it is heroic when we love our enemies. And that, my friends, is why I think that Christopher Hitchens is wrong. And we know it in our guts. And I get that all of this sounds like I'm a flower child. I get that we have some very serious things in the world that we've got to figure out. And we can't call up the head of ISIS and say, but we love you, man. And they're going to lay down their weapons and walk away. It doesn't work that way. But I have two things that I want to wind us down with here. One is that I think this is what we call in logic a red herring. It's a distraction. The truth is that most of the enemies we have can be dealt with, at least often. Family stuff, students, annoying drivers, right? That stuff is much less costly. It doesn't take that much from us to practice loving our enemies. And secondly, I think my whole point in being here today is to say I think we've put the cart before the horse as a culture. I don't mean you and me. As a culture, we've tried to figure out what to do about all this stuff before deciding what our end game is. If our goal is obliterate the enemy, then I'm pretty sure I know what to do about all these things. I am proposing a shift in attitude and then come back and discuss what we should do about any of these things. And the shift in attitude I'm proposing is one by my favorite author, Brian McLaren, or one of them. He says we, those who are going to love our enemies, will be a unique us in relation to all the other thems of the world. No, our identity will not be us at the top of the pyramid and them at the bottom, or vice versa. Nor will our identity be us assimilated into them, or us assimilating them into us. Nor will it be us against them, us apart from them, or us in spite of them. No, our unique identity will be us for them, us with them, us for the benefit and blessing of all. I'm bad at this. I did some really good things on this last year, on some really big topics, and then I crashed and burned on some other things, and you guys witnessed some of those things. But I want to get better, and I'm inviting you to hold me accountable. You can watch me fail at loving people who are at cross purposes with me, and you can talk about me behind my back if you want. Oh, she gave that lecture. But I'm inviting you to say it to my face, and I will say, oh, I gotta fix that. It may not fix the world, but I want it to be my goal, the double victory. I want the double victory, and I am willing to wait, and I am willing to pay. I'm in. Are you in? Thank you for your time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, many of you all know that we've had the last lecture series here at Mountain View College before. And when Kathy and I were actually talking about it some time ago, and with Steve Sosa a little bit as well, I was really excited to hear that we've done this before, because I thought it was really a great idea, and is to bring it back. I think it's important for us to appreciate folks. That was amazing. I love the double victory, and I do apologize. I had to go welcome also our new nursing students in the spring as well. So but everything that you're talking about, and just listening just for the brief amount that I was able to just take that right next door to new students coming in. It's about caring about people. It's about winning together. I will tell you to your face, you are the amazing professor who just gave this lecture. So, and what I love about it is that you spoke from your heart, you spoke from your soul, you spoke to where you were coming from, and where I think not only yourself, but everybody around you, and as a country and as a society, that we really need to strive to go. And so I think that all of us hopefully have learned something today to actually take that challenge, so that we can have victories all the way around Mountain View College and everywhere else that we go. And so I would like to, one is thank Debbie Nichols one more time for
Hi. Can you see? Yes? Yes. Okay, I'm jumping. What? Sorry. We gotta have a code. I don't think we're gonna be able to do it.
It's an iPhone, just slide it up.
yeah, right here.
Straight at you, straight at you.
Kathy, why don't you shout out your phone? We're good.